Dick York spent his final days as a janitor because of just one scene. Dennis Hopper got blacklisted twice, and Michael Landon's beloved TV Western likely poisoned its actors. These Westerns weren't just career killers, they destroyed lives, ended friendships, and left actors literally broken. Here's Hollywood's darker-than-fiction history they'd rather keep buried. This one didn't just wreck a man's body, it wrecked his entire life. Dick York was filming a scene with Gary Cooper, working one of those heavy railroad handcars. Director yells cut, everyone else lets go, but York keeps pushing the pump handle, not realizing the shot's done. That split second of strain tore muscles along his spine and twisted his back so badly he never recovered. He lived with chronic pain for the rest of his life. Tried to push through it, most people remember him as Darren on Bewitched, but the pain followed him to that set too. Midway through the series, York collapsed from a seizure triggered by the meds and the damage. That was it, he had to be replaced. By the 70s, his career was gone. Hollywood had moved on. He ended up broke, sick, and working as a janitor just to get by. Financially and physically destitute. That's how one author put it. All of it traced back to that 1 second on a set in 1959. This one didn't involve broken bones, but it did break a career. Dennis Hopper was young, cocky, and wanted to prove himself. The director, Henry Hathaway, was an old-school studio guy who didn't want his authority challenged. So when Hopper started pushing back on how to play a scene, things got ugly. Hopper refused to take Hathaway's direction. One scene took over 80 takes. Day after day, same standoff. Hathaway finally told him flat out, "You'll never work in this town again." And for a while, he didn't. Hopper got blacklisted, not officially, but everyone in town started treating him like damaged goods. Too difficult, too much trouble. It took 7 years for Hopper to claw his way back. He had to lean on John Wayne, of all people, for a small role just to get the industry to stop slamming doors in his face. That one standoff on a Western set nearly wiped out his career before it ever really started. This was supposed to be John Wayne's masterpiece, his big swing as a director. Instead, it nearly bankrupted him, and it took a few other people down with it too. Wayne dumped his own money into the Alamo, obsessed with getting it made. Everything about the production ballooned. The sets, the cast, the shooting schedule, it all spiraled. By the time it was done, the budget was out of control. And then the movie flopped. Not a total disaster, but way under what it needed to earn. Wayne had to scramble into whatever acting jobs he could find just to stay afloat. But the real damage landed on Richard Widmark. Widmark clashed hard with Wayne on set. He hated how Wayne directed, hated the whole tone of the film. And Wayne didn't forget it. After the movie bombed, Widmark's momentum took a nosedive. He still worked, but the major roles dried up. He never got back the heat he had before the Alamo, and his once promising career was ruined. This was supposed to be Clinton Spilsbury's big break. 30 years old, completely unknown, barely a couple of TV credits to his name. And suddenly, he's cast as the Lone Ranger in a big-budget Western backed by serious money. They were hoping for another Christopher Reeve situation. What they got instead was a total train wreck. From day one, Spilsbury was a nightmare. He fought with crew, got into bar brawls during production, and kept pushing back on the script because he couldn't deliver the lines. He even asked the entire film to be shot in sequence so he could build his character's arc. The director, William Fraker, had no control over him. Spilsbury accused the crew of trying to ruin his career while they were still filming the movie. And here's the real kicker. His acting was so flat, the producers ended up replacing almost all of his dialogue. They brought in James Keach to dub over Spilsbury's lines after the shoot. That's how bad it was. You've got this big Western, this iconic character, and the guy in the mask doesn't even get to keep his own voice. Word got out fast. Spilsbury had to sit through interviews where everyone knew his voice had been replaced. And when the movie finally came out, it bombed. Critics tore it apart. Audiences didn't care. And Clinton Spilsbury, who was supposed to be Hollywood's next big thing, never acted in another film again. As of 2025, The Legend of the Lone Ranger is still his only screen credit. His career was over before it even started. On paper, How the West Was Won was one of those sweeping all-star epics. Huge cast, giant budget, massive scope. But behind the scenes, it came with a real cost. During one of the train robbery scenes, stuntman Bob Morgan, who was doubling for George Peppard, was doing a dangerous bit where he had to hang between two moving rail cars loaded with logs. The chain securing the timber snapped. Tons of logs spilled out and crushed him. Morgan barely survived. One of his legs had to be amputated. He spent 5 years in recovery just trying to walk again. That injury ended his career, but it did more than that. It wrecked his life. His wife, actress Yvonne DiCarlo, had to take on whatever work she could find just to cover the medical bills. That included the Munsters, which she admitted she took for the money. The stress, the trauma, the long-term care, it all took a toll. She later said the accident played a big part in the breakdown of their marriage. This one hit even harder. Alias Smith and Jones was a light, easygoing Western TV series, the kind of show built on charm and chemistry. And its star, Pete Duell, had both. He played Hannibal Hayes, one half of the outlaw duo, and he made it look effortless. But behind the scenes, Duell was falling apart. He was struggling with alcoholism and serious depression. And on December 31st, 1971, after spending the evening watching his own show, he went into the bedroom and took his own life. He was 31 years old. Production was still ongoing. The studio tried to keep things going. They recast the role with Roger Davis and hoped the audience would stick around. But the spark was gone. Ratings dropped. The show limped on for a little over a year before getting canceled in 1973. By now, most people remember Little House on the Prairie as a wholesome TV staple. But decades after it wrapped, researchers and fans started noticing a chilling pattern. Too many of the cast were dying young. Michael Landon, who played Charles Ingalls, died of pancreatic cancer at just 54. His co-star Victor French, Mr. Edwards, also died of cancer in his 50s. And Merlin Olsen, who played Jonathan Garvey, same story. What started as coincidence turned into something harder to ignore. The outdoor scenes were all shot on a ranch in Simi Valley, California, just 15 miles from the site of the 1959 Santa Susana nuclear reactor meltdown, one of the worst nuclear accidents in U.S. history. The area was contaminated for years. Later studies found a cancer epidemic in the surrounding communities. And now you've got a set full of actors and crew spending years working right next to that disaster zone. No one's ever officially proven the connection. But Michael Landon's cancer was examined in a documentary that pointed straight to that site. When you look at the pattern, all these actors dying from aggressive cancers, all in their 50s, it's hard not to feel like that location left a mark. Sometimes the danger isn't a stunt gone wrong or a fight scene that gets out of control. Sometimes the damage is already in the ground beneath your feet. This one hit hard on set, and it changed the course of the entire production. The Horse Soldiers was a Civil War Western directed by John Ford, starring John Wayne and William Holden. It was supposed to be one of Ford's big war epics. But everything shifted the day stuntman Fred Kennedy died. Kennedy was doing a high-speed horsefall during a cavalry charge. He misjudged the timing, hit the ground wrong, and broke his neck. He died on the spot. Fred wasn't just some anonymous extra. He was a veteran actor and stuntman, a longtime part of John Ford's stock company. Ford was so shaken, he shut the production down immediately. Didn't even try to finish the scene. He couldn't bring himself to reshoot it. Wayne was rattled too. He had personally encouraged Kennedy to keep doing stunt work. It was one of those rare moments where the whole crew, hardened as they were, got hit with the reality of what they were doing. Ford pared down the ending, skipped what was supposed to be the big finale, and just wrapped the movie early. Financially, the film still made money, pulled in $3.6 million that year. Ford got the biggest paycheck of his career, $375,000 plus 10% of the gross, but he never got over what happened. The movie became one of the projects he didn't want to talk about ever again. If you want an example of a movie that should never have been finished, it's Wagons East. This was a Western comedy set in the 1860s, starring John Candy as a drunk wagon master guiding settlers back east. It was supposed to be light-hearted fun. Instead, it turned into tragedy. Candy was filming in Mexico, and one night, after wrapping what would end up being his last scene, he died in his sleep, just 43 years old. Heart attack. The next morning, a production assistant broke the news to the cast and crew. His co-stars Richard Lewis and Robert Picardo were both on set. Picardo said they just stood there and wept. They only had a few scenes left. But with Candy gone, the production went into full scramble mode. They rewrote parts of the script, used body doubles, did everything they could to patch it together. The movie came out later that year, but Candy never saw it. He went from being the life of the set to gone overnight. This was the guy who made Uncle Buck, SCTV, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Nobody expected this to be the end. Dennis Hopper had just come off the massive success of Easy Rider. He could have made anything. Universal gave him total freedom and a blank check to make his next project, so he went to a remote village in Peru and made the last movie. And everything that could go wrong did. Hopper wasn't just filming, he was partying, taking drugs, getting into orgies, floating around in hot tubs while the crew waited on him. No one was in charge. The movie spiraled into chaos. And then came the edit. Hopper delivered this completely surreal, drug-fueled version of the film that no one could follow. Universal was horrified. It hit theaters, bombed immediately, and critics tore it apart. Hopper was blacklisted almost overnight. No studio wanted to deal with him. His acting roles dried up, directing offers vanished, and his personal life fell apart. He spent the next decade spiraling deeper into addiction. He didn't get clean until the late 80s, and by then, his reputation was shot. The last movie was supposed to be his big artistic follow-up to Easy Rider. Instead, it wrecked his career and turned him into a cautionary tale.